This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. To pre-order Tarkir Dragonstorm, use my link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Nitahone, and in this video I'm continuing with my Tarkir Dragonstorm set review. I've already looked at the non-mono green cards in the set, and in this video we're looking at all those green ones. There's still lots more Tarkir Dragonstorm limited content on the way though, including an archetype guide, a list of the biggest bombs in the set, and draft videos. Anyway, for each of these cards I'll discuss how I think they'll perform in limited, that means draft and sealed, and I'll punctuate each evaluation with a letter grade. If you're new to my set reviews and unsure of what my letter grades mean, you can find a guide in the description for this video. There are a few important things to keep in mind as I review these cards. First, because we're talking about draft and sealed, we're only going to be talking about cards that are in play boosters. Second, these are of course my evaluations of these cards before it's possible to play the new format, because my goal is to have the set review done for you in time for the pre-release, and that means I'll be wrong about some stuff, but as the format comes into focus, I'll be doing videos that discuss how things have panned out. Lastly, I want to let you know that there are some set review related perks for being a channel member or a patron. You get access to my ongoing set notes during preview season, and you'll also get a spreadsheet with all of my grades once the set review is complete. And that means today, if those perks interest you, check out the description where you can find out how to support the channel using one of those methods. Alright, without further ado, let's dive in with a look at the green cards in Tarkir Dragonstorm. First up, it's Enoch Wayfarer, which for 1 generic and a green is a 1/1 dog scout at common. When it enters, you mill 3 cards, and you can put a land card from among them into your hand. If you don't, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. There was a card a lot like this in the Brothers War, and it was a nice 2-drop. I mean, it's a 1/1 that typically draws you a card and sets up some graveyard nonsense, and when you do whiff on the land, it's a 2/2 that still helps you with graveyard stuff and has some +1/+1 counter synergy, and green is definitely into both of those things in the format, so I think this is a C+. Next up, it's Attuned Hunter, which for 2 generic and a green is a 3/3 human ranger at uncommon. It's got trample. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So this works nicely with 2 mechanics in the set that green overlaps into, Renew and Harmonize. Both mechanics that exile cards from your graveyard for value. So getting at least 1 counter on this is pretty doable, especially by the later stages of the game. And in the meantime, it's a solid creature all on its own, giving it a C+. Next up, it's Bloomvine Regent, which for 3 generic and 2 green mana is a 4/5 dragon. At rare, it's got flying, and when it or another dragon you control enters, you gain 3 life, and it has an omen, which means you can also cast it as an instant or sorcery spell, in this case as a sorcery called Claim Territory, and it says search your library for up to 2 basic forest cards, reveal them, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle. When you cast an omen, you also shuffle the card into your library. I'm already on board with a 5 mana 4/5 flyer that gains 3 life when it enters. That's probably like a B+. It's just such an efficient real body, and the life gain gives you value no matter what. So the fact it triggers off of other dragons and can be a pseudo Kodama's Reach effect in the early game is no small thing. I think it's a bomb, giving it an A-. Next up, it's Champion of Dusan, which for 2 generic and a green is a 4/2 human warrior at common. It's got trample and it has renew, which means you can pay a cost and exile it from your graveyard to do something. In this case, you pay 1 generic and a green and you put a +1/+1 counter and a trample counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. A 3 mana 4/2 with trample on the face of it is not a great card, mostly because it has such low toughness for a fairly big investment. However, having high power, and 4 or more power specifically, does have extra value in this set, and the fact you can get trample and a +1/+1 counter out of it once it goes to the graveyard is pretty sweet. There are lots of counter payoffs in the set, giving it a C. Next up, it's Craterhoof Behemoth, which for 5 generic and 3 green is a 5/5 beast at mythic rare. It's got haste, and when it enters, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So this is fairly well known to people as a super insane magic card, and yeah, it sees a ton of play in Legacy, and it's great in Commander, but it's not nearly as good in Limited as it is in other formats, mostly because getting it down ahead of schedule is pretty challenging, and because it asks you to have a built-out board to be at its best. Now, to be fair, most of the time, if you do cast this, it's going to win you the game, but at 8 mana, you can't really rely on consistently casting it, so it's a little annoying that there are situations where it doesn't do enough to get you there. Now, granted, they are few and far between, but if I'm spending 8 mana, a card should just win me the game from almost any position, and this doesn't always get there. The good news is ramp does look pretty legitimate in green, but this wouldn't be the first time that it looked like green had a bunch of really good ramp, but it turns out the format is too fast for that to matter. So that is something we have to concern ourselves with. Is this a format where you can actually take off turn 3 or 4 to ramp your mana? If the answer is yes, then Craterhoof Behemoth is going to be really good. If the answer is no, it's not going to be good at all. I am leaning towards the format being one where you can do that, at least a little bit, but it still makes me a bit skeptical about this huge beast, which, by the way, it's cool that they gave it new art and that it's a big mammoth or something now, but why is it not also an elephant? It seems like they should have given it a more generic beast form than they did, but anyway, that part doesn't actually matter for the card here. Basically, if you cast it, you probably win, but it's going to get stuck in your hand frequently, but I do think there's enough ramp for it to be a B. And yeah, it's a card that can end up varying wildly. If it ends up being a really slow format where ramping's really easy, it's a bomb. And if it ends up being a fast format where you need to be playing 3 and 4 drops and not casting ramp spells, it's probably like a D. Next up, it's Dragon Sniper, which for 1 green mana is a 1/1 human archer at uncommon, and it's got Vigilance, Reach, and Death Touch. So a 1 mana 1/1 with Death Touch is a C in virtually every format. It can trade up with anything and works well with removal effects that let it do damage to other creatures, which green always has. So adding both Reach and Vigilance is amazing. It means it can now even trade for flyers, which is important in a set with a bunch of dragons and means it lives up to its name. But it can also attack while still taking advantage of Death Touch on defense. 1/1 Death Touchers do frequently also have decent attacks, like when all your opponent has is like a 4/4 and a 5/5. But frequently, you don't actually take advantage of them with most 1 mana 1/1 Death Touchers because you want to be able to block those things. But in this case, you can get in for 1 and still stay back on defense with your Death Toucher. So this looks like it gives you a lot for 1 mana. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Dragon Brood's Relic, which for 1 generic and a green is an uncommon artifact. You can tap it and an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color, and you can pay 3 generic and 1 mana of each color and sacrifice this to create a 4/4 dragon creature token named Reliquary Dragon that's all colors. It has flying, lifelink, and when this token enters, it deals 3 damage to any target. Activate only as a sorcery. This card's really cool and like an early candidate for my favorite card in the set and a card that I want to make work in Limited. And I think it's actually pretty good too. It offers decent fixing and ramp. You don't always have a creature you can tap for this, but you'll be able to use this a decent chunk of the time. And with the fixing in the format, especially in green, getting a huge creature token out of this in the late game is not a pipe dream, especially because the relic can produce mana for its own ability. This probably needs a build-around grade though, but it looks like a legit 5-color build-around to me, since the payoff is a token that breaks the game wide open, and the baseline is a solid mana rock. Keep in mind, because it has lifelink, it basically lightning helixes when it enters. You'll gain 3 life in addition to doing 3 damage to a creature or to your opponent, and then you have a 4/4 flying lifelinker, which can really alter games in a big way. That said, it's probably like a D+ in most green decks in the format, but I think it has a ceiling of a B. Getting that token is a pretty legit payoff. Next up, it's Deuceute Earthcarver, which for 5 generic and a green is a 4/4 elephant druid at common. It's got reach, and when it enters, it endures 3. That means you can either put 3 +1/+1 counters on the Earthcarver or create a 3/3 white spirit creature token. A 6 mana 4/4 with reach that makes a 3/3 is a good 6-drop, and while that's usually where you want to go, since it usually gives you a 2-for-1, sometimes just getting 1 big body is great, and in this case, you get a 6 mana 7/7 with reach. The modality is awesome here and makes this a really good 6-drop. It's probably going to be like the common 6-drop that you play in like all of your green decks. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Encroaching Dragonstorm, which for 3 generic and a green is an uncommon enchantment. When it enters, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tab, then shuffle. When a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. So this is one of those ramp cards that is really powerful, but it seems a little bit dangerous to take a turn off. This is the kind of card that can help you get to Craterhoof Behemoth. But yeah, grabbing 2 lands and getting to fix your mana while you do it is powerful. And if you play a dragon, you can do it again. Casting this does entail some significant risk. Like if your opponent has just curved out and you played like a 3-drop and then Encroaching Dragonstorm, you're not going to be in very good shape. But I think as long as you make sure that your deck has some decent 1 and 2 drops, taking this turn off for this huge boost in mana is going to be worth it. Not every deck wants it, but a deck that's trying to ramp and really fix its mana certainly does. So I think it's a C, but this is another card that could fluctuate wildly if the format ends up being really fast, which I don't expect, of a 3-color format, but if it ends up being that way, it'll be worse. Next up, it's Formation Breaker, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/1 beast at uncommon. Creatures with power less than its power can't block it, and as long as you control a creature with a counter on it, this gets +1/+2. We've already seen a significant number of counters in this video, and we are in no way done seeing them. Abzan in particular loves its counters, so this will be a 3/3 reasonably often, and that means lots of creatures simply won't be able to block it. That said, this evasion ability isn't amazing, since it still lets things block it that can trade with it or outright kill it. It just turns off chump blocking, which is upside, but it's not like amazing upside. In fact, it would be better upside in many situations if it said that creatures with power equal to or greater than its power can't block it, because then nothing would be able to trade with it when it attacks. Your opponent would only be able to chump block, which generally is going to be more advantageous more frequently. Though there are times when all your opponent will have in play are smaller creatures, and obviously this gets better when you put more counters on it, fewer things will be able to block it, so it will just be unblockable sometimes. But sometimes it'll also be a 2-mana 2/1 or a 2-mana 3/3 that's mostly vanilla. I think it's a C+. Next up, it's Herd Heirloom, which for 1 generic and a green is a rare artifact. Add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. You can also tap it, and until end of turn, target creature you control with power 4 or greater gains trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I always bemoan mana rocks that cost 3, but when they cost 2, they're way better, since you can usually get away with spending 2 mana and not impacting the board, at least more so than when you're spending 3 mana, and it also means you start accelerating your mana earlier, like playing a 4-drop on turn 3. The mana here is somewhat restrictive, but most of the time when you're ramping in limited, you're ramping into a creature, like Craterhoof Behemoth, and this also has the additional upside of being able to buff your bigger creatures to draw you cards. If you can even get 1 card out of this, it's going to feel really good, and sometimes you'll be able to get more. This has a really good floor and can turn into a pretty legitimate value engine. I like it a lot. I'm giving it a B+. Next up, it's Heritage Reclamation, which for 1 generic and a green is a common instant. Choose 1, destroy target artifact, or destroy target enchantment, or exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, draw a card. So this is Naturalize, except it can also deal with a card in the graveyard, like a card with Harmonize or Endure. You can even go after your own graveyard, which has some applications in the format, like that 3/3 Trampler. You can give it a +1/+1 counter and draw a card at instant speed if you exile your own thing. Still, all 3 modes are narrow, so much so that even though you have 3 options, you're going to find yourselves in spots when no mode on this is meaningful. You can, of course, always cycle it away to draw a card, but we've seen time and time again cards that are too narrow, even when they have cycling, aren't exactly good. They have very negligible effects on the game. But I think this will be able to do something often enough for it to be a C-, but it's probably a little better out of your sideboard. Next up, it's Inspirited Vanguard, which for 4 generic and a green is a 3/2 human soldier at uncommon, and when it enters or attacks, it endures 2. So this looks great. 5 mana for a 3/2 and a 2/2. That's a card you play 100% of the time, and that's like the baseline, since it can endure more than once, and getting to make that choice every time is great, because if the Vanguard can attack and the best your opponent can do is trade, you probably make a 2/2, but if buffing it means they can't block it effectively, you'll do that so you get more endure triggers in the future. Obviously, when it enters, you can also have it be a 5/4, which if you need a high power creature can be useful. If you need a creature with counters, that can be useful. And it can also set it up so that it can swing as a 7/6 on the next turn, which that in of itself is a pretty big problem for your opponent. This looks like an excellent uncommon. I'm giving it a B+. Next up, it's Knockout Maneuver, which for 2 generic and a green is an uncommon sorcery. It says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. This is a little bit overcosted for what we're used to, especially at sorcery speed and at uncommon, but, it's still pretty good. Your creature getting a permanent buff both means that it will do a better job of punching above its weight class and give you some +1/+1 counter value, potentially. It's probably a little bit too clunky to be premium, and it has the downside this type of spell always has. You have to be careful when you cast it, since removal blows you out hard, and that's always harder to do with a sorcery, since there are fewer situations when you can cast it in the first place. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Crotic Nest Guard, which for 2 generic and a green is a 4/4 insect at common with Defender. You can pay 2 generic and a green, and it can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. So this being undercosted for a 4/4 has value beyond this just being big, thanks to Teamer liking high power creatures, but I'm still not super into this. It's not bad as like a defensive creature, but like you're never attacking with this until the late game because the ability's so expensive. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Lacid Prowler, which for 2 generic and 2 green is a 5/5 Snake Ranger at rare. When it enters, you may mill cards equal to the number of lands you control, and it has Renew for 1 generic and a green, and you put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard, activate only as a sorcery. So even with all the power creep we've seen over the years, a 4-mana 5/5 is still pretty legit in today's Magic, and this comes with so much upside. It can single-handedly mill a big chunk of your deck, which is likely to be more upside than downside in green, especially because this renewability is at its best when you have a well-stocked graveyard. Paying like 2 mana for even 5 counters after this dies is going to feel great, and will feel like you're getting a full card worth of value in addition to getting this nice body earlier, so this generally feels like you're getting a 2-for-1 no matter how you slice it. I also love that the mill trigger says may. You know, sometimes in the extreme late game, if this is like your top deck, you might just mill yourself out if it didn't say may, but luckily it does. I think it's a bomb. I'm giving it an A-. Next up, it's Nature's Rhythm, which for X and 2 green is a rare sorcery. Search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle, and it has Harmonize for X and 4 green, and that means you can cast it from your graveyard and tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by an amount of generic mana equal to its power, and then you exile Nature's Rhythm. Creature tutors that make you spend a whole bunch of mana, even when they put a creature on the battlefield, don't tend to be good in Limited. You just overpay for a creature in your deck, and that's rarely worth it, because in Limited you just don't have like an amazing toolbox of creatures you can choose from with a card like this. You have a bunch of limited chaff, and the best stuff will cost a ton of mana for you to be able to grab it. Having Harmonize does mean it can generate a 2-for-1 eventually, but that's even harder to cast, and having 4 green in Limited is far from automatic. I think this is a D. Next up, it's Piercing Exhale, which for 1 generic and a green is a common instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you can behold a dragon, which means you choose a dragon you control or reveal a dragon from your hand, and target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker. If a dragon was beheld, surveil 2. It's pretty funny how much better this removal spell is than the 3-mana sorcery one that we saw at Uncommon. I mean, you never get a +1/+1 counter here, but I'm more than happy to give up a counter for an instant that costs 1 less, and it has even more upside than that because sometimes you'll even get to surveil 2. Being an instant with this effect is so much better because it's easier to find a window where you can't get blown out because your opponent's tapped out. You can also blow out combat tricks that your opponent uses and things like that. And then yeah, I mean, surveil 2 is pretty big upside. You know, it's not like insane, but if this surveilled 2 every time, I'd be kind of tempted to give it a B+, because not only would it let you kill something, it would very likely drastically improve your next few draws or give you some graveyard synergy. As it is, it's merely a B, but probably green's best common. Next up, it's Rainveil Rejuvenator, which for 3 generic and a green is a 2/4 Elephant Druid at uncommon. When it enters, you can mill 3 cards, and you can tap it to add an amount of green equal to its power. So a 4-mana 2/4 is not a great stat line, but this helps you load your graveyard, which definitely matters in green, and it can significantly ramp your mana, you know, so you can cast Craterhoof Behemoth. So I think it does what you're looking for in green. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Rite of Renewal, which for 3 generic and a green is an uncommon sorcery. Return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Target player shuffles up to 4 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Exile Rite of Renewal. Graveyard nonsense is alive and well in this format, and Rite of Renewal is going to be a card you're happy to have one of in a lot of green decks, and especially in Sultai, as it will give you the late game value to win the game. Also, you're in some risk in Sultai decks of accidentally milling yourself out, and while Omen helps with that, this card can also help keep that from happening, while also giving you the kind of value that probably wins you the game before you need to worry about milling yourself out. Anyway, I think it's a C. Next up, it's Roamer's Routine, which for 2 generic and a green is a common sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, and it has Harmonize for 4 generic and a green. So this is another ramp spell that you have to take a turn off for, but can help you cast something like Craterhoof Behemoth. 3 mana to grab a land and put it into play tapped is normally not good in Limited though. You don't add to the board and the mana boost is often negligible. This does fix your mana in a format where that matters, and Harmonize definitely helps upgrade this, as it can ultimately turn into a 2-for-1, albeit a clunky one that can only ever add lands to the board, but this definitely offers nice fixing in a format where I think that matters, so I'm starting it at a C. Next up, it's Sage of the Fang, which for 2 generic and a green is a 2/2 human druid at uncommon. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and it has Renew for 3 generic and a green, and you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature, activate only as a sorcery. So this can put its enters counter on itself, so it's a 3 mana 3/3 at worst, and you'll often have somewhere better to put the counter. Furthermore, the Renew ability here is likely to be more useful if you put the counter somewhere else, since it pays you off for having counters too. Like if you put the counter on something else, then you trade this off for their 2/2, then you renew and put the counter on the creature you already had a counter on, it's going to end up with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. But even if you don't put this on the same creature you put the counter on the first time, you do get 2 counters out of this no matter what, and sometimes you'll get more because there are, of course, other ways to put counters on things. So this has like a really good baseline and then a really nice ceiling that's going to give you a lot of value out of the graveyard. I think it's a B-. Next up, it's Sagu Pummeler, which for 3 generic and a green is a 4/4 beast at common. It's got Reach, and it has Renew for 4 generic and a green. Put 2 +1/+1 counters and a Reach counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. A 4 mana 4/4 with Reach is still pretty decent in Magic, albeit not exciting. 2 counters plus Reach for 5 mana, though, is going to feel pretty good when you're flooding out in the late game and you have this in your graveyard, giving it a C. Next up, it's Sagu Wildling, which for 4 generic and a green is a 3/3 dragon at common. It's got flying. When it enters, you gain 3 life, and it has an Omen, which is Roost Seek for 1 green mana. It's a sorcery, and you search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. I like this design. In the early game, it can grab you the land you need, and we've seen that effect be pretty solid, especially in formats with lots of cards that need fixing, and we're in a 3-color format here, so you're certainly going to be more interested in fixing than normal. So you'll cast that in the early game pretty happily most of the time, and then it'll get shuffled back into your deck. And then at some point in the game, or if you draw it late and have never Roost Seek, that's fine too. Playing this as a 5 mana 3/3 flyer that gains you 3 isn't too bad. The stat line certainly isn't great, but the fact that it makes sure to give you some life up front helps offset the fact that your opponent might just be able to kill it for 2 mana or something like that. But if they can't, you end up with a creature who's at least kind of a speed bump that also gains you some life. And I think the overall package here results in a C+. Next up, it's Sarkhan's Resolve, which for 1 generic and a green is a common instant. Choose 1, target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, or destroy target creature with flying. Plummet is usually a little bit too narrow to make the cut, even in a dragon set. I think that's probably true. But this is Plummet on an okay combat trick, so I imagine you'll play it in your main deck if you're in the market for a trick, as aggressive green decks often will be. There are more flyers than usual in the format, it is true, so that makes the Plummet mode a little bit better, but it still probably wouldn't be good enough on its own, because I think even with both of these modes, it's probably just a C-. Next up, it's Snakeskin Veil, which for 1 green mana is an instant at common, and you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control that gains hexproof until end of turn. I'm pretty annoyed they printed this at common, and kind of annoyed that we keep seeing this freaking card. It's been reprinted a ton lately, and it's really good. And it's good in a way that is super frustrating. It allows green players to completely ignore removal spells for only 1 green mana, which almost always means they come out ahead in terms of mana equity, and the buff is permanent, which is very relevant with the counter payoffs in this format. It's still situational, but it's the type of trick that you value fairly highly because it's so easy to leave mana up for and useful all the time. It isn't even shabby in combat since it can turn trades into your creature winning, which once again probably means your opponent spent way more mana than you did on the card that they lose. I think this is a C+. Next up, it's Sultai Devotee, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/1 zombie snake druid at common. It's got Death Touch, and you can pay 1 generic to add black, green, or blue. Activate only once each turn. Mana filtering is better than usual in this 3-color format, so I think all of these Devotees, which are all like reasonable creatures with this mana filtering effect, are going to be nice and limited, cards that you play a lot. And this one can even trade off once you reach a point in the game where you don't really have a reason to need to filter mana, and that certainly allows it to stay somewhat relevant. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Surrak, Elusive Hunter, which for 2 generic and a green is a 4/3 legendary human warrior at rare. It can't be countered. It has trample. Whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. Surok counts himself, so if your opponent wants to kill something, they can't just kill him and not let you get the 2-for-1 because you will draw a card off of them doing that, and they'll frequently want to do that because if it sticks around, it lends that effect to everything. He's also got high power for the cost and can rumble pretty well. There are going to be times, especially if you get him later in the game, where he's kind of outmatched, in which case the card draw when your opponent removes stuff doesn't matter as much since, you're completely outmatched. So if you're pretty far behind, it's not amazing, but it's still pretty good overall. It has good stats, it's got trample, it has high power, and you're going to get 2-for-1s with it a lot of the time. I'm giving it a B+. Next up, it's Synchronized Charge, which for 1 generic and a green is an uncommon sorcery. Distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. Creatures you control with counters on them gain vigilance and trample until end of turn, and it has Harmonized for 4 generic and a green. So, at a minimum, this gives vigilance and trample to the creatures that you just put counters on with it. And if you're in green, you probably have some other creatures who are going to gain those keywords too. Also, if you draw this late, the Harmonize is cheap enough that it is conceivable you can cast this twice in a single turn, kind of turning it into Overrun. The Vigilance Trample combo is always nice as it wrecks chump blocks and makes it so that you can swing with anything without giving up entirely on defending yourself when your opponent attacks you back. Even just the base effect for 2 mana seems kind of okay, and it doesn't feel like a stretch that you'll have enough counters to really get this going, giving it a C+. Next up, it's Trade Route Envoy, which for 3 generic and a green is a 4/3 dog soldier at common. When it enters, you draw a card if you control a creature with a counter on it. If you don't draw a card this way, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This is a really good common. I'd play either version of this card. A 4-mana 4/3 that always draws you a card is the best mode, and it's great. But a 4-mana 5/4 that has a counter on it, so it sets up various synergies, is also a card you'd pretty much always play. And I think you'll draw with this pretty often in green, giving it a B-. Next up, it's Traveling Botanist, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/3 dog scouted uncommon. When it becomes tapped, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So this is a 2-mana 2/3 that has a better version of Surveil when it gets tapped. Better, because you just straight up draw the card if it's a land, but you still have the option of dumping whatever's on top into the graveyard or leaving it there. It can trigger off of attacking, of course, but it can also trigger when you Harmonize. This looks like a 2-drop that will be really frustrating to play against when it comes down on schedule because it's so good at generating value. I'm giving it a B-. Next up, it's Undergrowth Leopard, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/2 cat at common with vigilance. You can pay 1 generic and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. We pretty much saw this card in Thunder Junction, and it was fine. A card like this is okay at attacking and blocking, and it has some added utility in some games. This format doesn't have a ton of targets for it, but they'll be around. It's nice to be able to have a naturalize-like effect like this in your main deck without having to sacrifice having like a 2-drop in your deck. So I think it's a C-. And our last green card is Warden of the Grove, which for 2 generic and a green is a 2/2 Hydra at rare. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever another non-token creature you control enters, it endures X, where X is a number of counters on this creature. This is really strong. It'll get a counter the turn you cast it, which is nice, as a 3-mana 3/3 is much more likely to make it to your next turn than a 3-mana 2/2 is. And if you make it to your next turn, you're very likely to get an Endure trigger that really makes whatever creature you play way better. And the Warden just keeps getting bigger and giving you better Endure value every turn. Basically, this is a 3-drop that takes over games in a big way. It's definitely a bomb. I'm giving it an A. So those are all the green cards in Tarkir Dragonstorm, and now I've given you my thoughts on every individual card in the set. Next, I'll be taking a look at the archetypes to tell you what's going on with each of the clans and in each of the 2-color combinations. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to catch up on the rest of this set review, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.